Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into one of the most unbelievable plot twists in all of human history. Imagine a guy, right? A totally ruthless, bloodthirsty warlord who literally butchers his way to the throne. And then, he just stops. He does a complete 180 and becomes this legendary champion of global peace. We're talking about Ashoka the Great. Back in the 3rd century BCE, he ruled the massive Mauryan Empire. So how on earth does a man soaked in the blood of his enemies transform into a literal beacon of compassion, a guy whose legacy still shapes modern India today? Well, let's find out.
To really wrap our heads around this transformation, we have to look at the sheer, terrifying scale of what happened. 100,000. That is the staggering, horrifying number of people left dead on the battlefield of Kalinga in 261 BCE. And right then, in the immediate aftermath of this absolute industrial-scale slaughter, right at the peak of his imperial power, the most powerful man in the world makes a decision that literally shakes the foundations of history. He just walks away from war, forever.
But to understand why Ashoka pivoted so hard, we kind of have to hit rewind and go back to his origins around 304 BCE. He was born into the massive Mauryan Empire. His grandfather, Chandragupta, founded it, and his dad, Bindusara, expanded it, mostly through violence. And let me tell you, this royal court, it was incredibly competitive, paranoid, and just deeply unsafe. Ashoka wasn't even the favorite son. He was born to a mother of pretty modest origins. So in a system where you either eliminate your brothers or they eliminate you, Ashoka was forged in this absolute pressure cooker of fear and ambition.
The contrast between Ashoka and his older half-brother, Crown Prince Susuma, is honestly pretty wild. Susuma was the golden boy, right? Groomed from day one to sit on the throne. But Ashoka was the fixer. He was the one with the raw talent, the guy they sent away to do all the dirty work. He made a name for himself by ruthlessly crushing a rebellion in the city of Taxila, and he basically ran the city of Ujjain as its viceroy. So he was incredibly capable, super popular with the military, and yeah, extremely dangerous.
All that simmering tension finally exploded when Emperor Bindusara got sick around 272 BCE. And Ashoka, he didn't wait around for an invitation. He just marched his loyal army straight into the capital of Pataliputra and launched this incredibly swift, brutal power grab. He wiped out his rivals, including the golden boy, Susuma. In fact, some accounts say Susuma was tricked into falling into a pit of burning coals. No way around it. Ashoka's ruthless efficiency earned him a terrifying new nickname, Chanda Ashoka, which basically translates to Ashoka the Fierce. And securing that empire was so messy that his official coronation actually had to be delayed for 4 whole years while he violently stamped out rebellions across the map.
So once he's finally crowned, Ashoka looks out over his massive territory, and there's this one glaring problem staring back at him: Kalinga. The Mauryan Empire was this unstoppable military machine, sure, but Kalinga, sitting right over on the eastern coast, was a wildly wealthy, proud, and fiercely independent maritime kingdom. They controlled all these super lucrative trade routes down to Southeast Asia. And for a guy who just murdered his way to the top, having a rich, independent rival sitting right on his border was just completely unacceptable.
In 261 BCE, Ashoka unleashes the full force of his military on Kalinga, and the devastation was just apocalyptic. The official numbers, which were actually recorded by Ashoka himself, are mind-numbing. 100,000 men and animals killed in action, and another 150,000 dragged away as captives. Entire towns just wiped off the map. And the thing is, Ashoka didn't just get a report about this at a desk somewhere. He was right there. He walked through those captured cities, heard the screams, and looked the industrial-scale slaughter he caused right in the face.
And that sheer, unimaginable scale of human suffering, it completely broke him. The victory basically shattered the conqueror. Carved right into solid stone by Ashoka himself, in what's known as Rock Edict 13, is this totally mind-blowing confession. He actually wrote that the slaughter, the death, and the deportation of all those people is, quote, a matter of profound sorrow and regret to His Sacred Majesty. I mean, think about that. This wasn't some flashy propaganda to make him look tough. This was an incredibly vulnerable public admission of crushing guilt from the most powerful man on the planet.
Which brings us to one of the most unbelievable identity shifts in recorded history. The guy they called Chanda Ashoka, the warlord who killed his own brother and supposedly built a prison so horrific people called it Ashoka's Hell, completely transforms. He becomes Dhamma Ashoka, the pious emperor entirely dedicated to righteousness.
He basically realized that winning the Kalinga War had cost him his own soul. So he makes this completely unprecedented decision to just rewrite the entire rulebook on what it means to be an emperor.
Now, it's really important to know this wasn't just some magical overnight switch. If we trace his spiritual journey, it was actually a pretty slow evolution. Years earlier, when he was governing Ujjain, he used to hang out with all sorts of different religious ascetics, including Buddhist monks. But it was the trauma of Kalinga that really kicked his search for meaning into high gear. He officially became an upasaka, which is a lay Buddhist, but he even admitted he kind of slacked off for a couple of years. It wasn't until later that he really leaned into the monastic community, the Sangha, and fully committed his life to this peaceful path.
So the big question is, how do you actually govern a gigantic, incredibly diverse empire with this new mindset? Well, he didn't just force everyone to convert to Buddhism. That would have been a disaster. Instead, he came up with this concept he called Dhamma. Now, Dhamma was this very broad, super inclusive, universal ethical code. It was all about moral governance, taking care of your community, treating literally all living beings with kindness, and crucially, religious tolerance. It was essentially a framework designed to hold tens of millions of diverse people together without ever having to threaten them with a sword.
And Ashoka wasn't just talking the talk. He threw the entire weight of his imperial treasury behind this. He basically invented a state welfare system which was completely unheard of in the ancient world. He straight up abolished the death penalty. He banned royal animal hunts. To make life easier for travelers, he ordered banyan trees to be planted for shade and had wells dug every half-mile along the major roads. He even built hospitals that gave free medical care to people, and get this, he created veterinary clinics too, universal health care even for your pets. Plus, he appointed these special officers called Dhamma Mahamatas just to make sure all these welfare programs were actually getting done.
But to make absolutely sure his message reached every single corner of his empire, Ashoka launched what was basically a massive ancient PR campaign. He had his new laws carved into these giant sandstone pillars and massive boulders all over the place. And he didn't just use one language. Up in northern India, he used Brahmi. In the northwest, he wrote in Greek. And out in the areas with Persian influence, he used Aramaic. He was literally speaking directly to his subjects in their own native languages, promising them that from now on, the government was there to protect them, not terrorize them.
His absolute devotion to his faith also completely transformed the physical landscape of India. According to Buddhist legends, Ashoka is credited with this jaw-dropping architectural flex. 84,000, the traditions say he gathered up the physical relics of the Buddha, divided them all up, and built 84,000 stupas and monasteries, or viharas, across the empire to keep them safe. Now, whether that number is totally literal or just symbolic, his massive financial backing caused an absolute explosion in the growth of the monastic community.
Of course, getting that deeply involved with religion meant Ashoka eventually had to step in and act as its protector. According to traditions from Sri Lanka, all that lavish state funding actually attracted a whole bunch of fake monks. Guys who were just joining the monasteries for the cushy lifestyle and the great benefits package. This obviously caused huge tensions and even stopped some religious ceremonies from happening. So Ashoka calls for this massive summit, the Third Buddhist Council, right in his capital of Pataliputra. Working with senior monks, he basically ran an ancient audit and supposedly kicked out 60,000 heretical or fake monks just to clean up the Sangha and get back to the core teachings. Once he got his own house in order, Ashoka started looking beyond his borders. But this time, not with armies, with ideas. He started sending out these peaceful, diplomatic, and religious envoys. He actually sent his own son, Mahinda, and his daughter, Sangamita, down to Sri Lanka. And they successfully converted the king there. He sent other envoys way up north to Kashmir and Gandhara, and even dispatched messengers way out west to the Hellenistic Greek kingdoms, including places like Egypt and Macedonia. And it's largely because of these specific missions that Buddhism transformed from this small regional sect in India into a massive global world religion.
But look, running a gigantic empire purely on good vibes and moral high grounds is complicated. In his final years, after ruling for almost 40 years, the harsh realities of running a government really started to catch up with all his idealism. All those crazy lavish donations he was making to the Buddhist monasteries, they severely strained the imperial bank accounts. His own ministers started pushing back. On top of that, playing favorites with Buddhism caused some really deep resentment among other religious groups, especially the Brahmins, who felt totally sidelined. And, Ashoka wasn't naive. He knew his kids and grandkids wouldn't have the same terrifying aura of power that he did. So his final edicts are honestly kind of heartbreaking. He is literally pleading with his descendants to please just avoid starting new wars and try to keep this fragile peace he built.
Ultimately, the Mauryan Empire did collapse about 50 years after he died, but Ashoka's legacy,
It achieved a totally different kind of immortality. Just think about this. When the modern Republic of India finally won its independence in 1947, they had to choose a symbol for their new nation. They didn't pick some British colonial crest, and they didn't pick a symbol of violent conquest. They picked Ashoka. The lion capital from one of his sandstone pillars became the official state emblem of India. And the Ashoka chakra, that's the wheel representing his righteous Dhamma, was placed dead center on the modern Indian national flag, a permanent symbol of progress, justice, and the idea that moral law outlasts any empire.
Ashoka's story basically challenges everything we think we know about how power works. He looked directly at the horrific nightmare he had created, and he actively chose to change everything. So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with this provocative question to chew on. Could a modern leader pull off something like this today? Could someone sitting at the absolute height of power execute a radical pivot from violent conquest to genuine, structural compassion? Is an empire built on peace actually sustainable? Or was Ashoka just this incredible anomaly of history? Think about that and keep exploring.